This program is made possible through the generous support of Butler County, Holly Frontier, and the Butler County Historical Society, home of the Kansas Oil Museum.
Welcome to Kansas Crossroads. In this episode, we explore the story of Andover. Often seen as a modern suburb of Wichita, Andover's roots go back much further. Newspapers from early 1880 detail the establishment of a post office and a growing community known as Cloud City.
The year 1880 was an eventful one. Ephraim Wagner deeded his land to Charlie Glancy, which is the land on which Old Andover now sits. June of 1880, Cloud City changes its name to Andover.
So join us as we explore the story of Andover. Andover's beginnings date back to the creation of what is called Bruno Township. The first settlement of the township occurred in February of 1869, and the first settler was Vincent Smith. Smith later recalled that as he explored the region, he encountered 500 Native Americans, possibly members of the Osage tribe. He encountered very few settlers. One individual that he was surprised to discover was an old man living in a dugout that went by the name of Franklin. The man said he had once been a sailor.
By May 1869, Vincent Smith filed his homestead claim at the land office that was then located in Humboldt, Kansas. The following year, in 1870, additional settlers homesteaded in the area. By 1916, Andover had a general store owned by W.E. Peacock, a bank, lumberyard, post office, millinery, barber, and blacksmith. The first church was the Methodist Church that is still in existence. The community was served by several one-room schoolhouses, but by the early 1900s, a school consolidation occurred, and in 1914, Andover High graduated its first class of 4 students.
In Andover today, we see a running and bike path that was once the route of the historic corridor of the former St. Louis-San Francisco Railroad, later changed to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. The railroad contributed greatly to the economy of towns and was in many cases the reason a town site emerged and grew. In the case of Andover, its location between Augusta and Wichita was important. The Andover train depot location, now about a block south of the football stadium, was 10 miles west of Augusta and 11 miles east of downtown Wichita. The first passenger train went through Andover in 1885.
The night of July 17th, 1898 was more than a warm summer evening. It was an evening when 2 men robbed the eastbound Frisco passenger train. Railroad agent S.B. McLaren, around 10 p.m., stepped out of the depot to flag down the passenger train, signaling it to stop. This moment that the robbers stepped from out of the shadows and demanded the items McLaren carried. News reports varied in the amounts, but it appears they secured about $45 in cash and around $60 in checks. The thieves then attempted to discover what the train safe held, but after several attempts, the safe would not open. A trainman escaped during the attempts and warned the citizens who were attending a social nearby. Several citizens who were armed attempted to capture the robbers. In the ensuing gunfire, Andover citizen Will Belford was shot in the back and his legs were paralyzed. A horse was killed belonging to one of the robbers. The thieves were later to be discovered as 2 escaped convicts, Sam Smith and Tim Wind. According to news articles of the period, Smith escaped on his horse, while Tim Wind ran east, stealing a horse a few miles away. The rendezvous point was Smith's home in Sumner County. The 2 men then proceeded south. However, they were tracked down by Wells Fargo detective and United States Marshals to Nowata, Indian Territory. Tim Wind was captured on August 4th. Sam Smith was eventually located as well, but not without a gunfight. They were arrested for attempted murder, changed to murder when Belford died, as well as robbery.
back in the late 50s is when I was a kid here in Andover, and where the Campbell's Locker Plant used to be there at Harrison and Main. I'd walk in the alley to go to school, and they had a dog in the backyard. I was new here and didn't know, and that dog would run to that fence and hit that fence, and I'd jump, and that's how I met my first good friend, Larry Campbell. Is that dog come out there and yapping, and he'd come out, and we'd walk down and meet then, and we'd walk down to the school, which was the only one here in town, and we played baseball. All of us kids did. There was probably 8 or 10 of us, and then they'd come in from other places. We all played in ball diamond down there, and we'd play workup all day long, every day. It was just, normal little town, and at night we'd play hide and go seek. So we all had the run of the town, and that's my earliest memories of this little town. So
one of my more memorable experiences there, other than playing with the kids and stuff, was the bus. You'd get on the bus, and they don't let you off on the side of the road where your house was, so you didn't have to cross. So the bus was going east towards, we had to go to Santa Fe Lake Road, turn around, come back. Well, that one evening, going to Santa Fe Lake Road, it got started snowing so bad. Time we got to he couldn't turn around. So we ended up going north on Santa Fe Lake Road to a farmhouse, and we spent the night.
Small community, pretty much everybody knew everyone, and it was just the classic, if you did something at school, your parents knew about it before you got home. And the parents, very few, there were a couple. Parents didn't go to the principal's office and yell at them for picking on their kid. You got home and you got punished again for what you did at school. But at the same time, if you were running around, everybody knew where you were and they were looking out for you. We joined the 4-H club. It's the Andover Aces 4-H club. And even though we were in Butler County, I'm not sure how they developed the affiliation, but we were considered a Sedgwick County club. So that when it came time for the annual county fair, we would go to Cheney rather than here to El Dorado. Didn't make any sense to me. It was a heck of a lot further drive, so it was kind of an ordeal. You draw a lottery, and I got picked to be in the 4-H calf scramble. 20 boys and 10 steers, and you had a rope, and you were supposed to make a halter out of it, catch your calf, and drag it across the line. And if you did that, you got to keep it with the understanding that you would take care of it and then show it in the next year's county show. So the year that I got picked to be in the calf scramble, the Hereford steers didn't come in. So they didn't have any steers for us to chase around the arena. So they picked out some of the roping stock. There were young Brahma calves, a little bit feistier than the Herefords that we were expecting. And they said, okay, you don't have to get the halter on them and drag them across the line, you just have to catch one. And so we were chasing them around and getting run over and kicked, and I grabbed one of them by the tail, and I wasn't going to let go. So they finally said, okay, that's good enough, you've got one.
The school was just one. It was kindergarten through 12th, and it was where the Cottonwood Elementary is up here on Andover Road. And it had 20 or 30 students per class. Some of them had 17 or little, but the senior classes back then in the late 50s, early 60s probably had 17, 18 people in the graduating classes, and each year was progressively getting more. And there weren't that many restaurants at Andover. The main one back in the early days there was the Dairy Haven that was at 13th and Andover Road, and Theda Lockhart owned that, and she'd employ all the high school girls to work it, and it was a good place. And then in the shopping center, well, we called it a shopping center. It was right there at 13th and Andover Road also, where the wood company is today. They had a little restaurant in there that I can't even remember the name of the person that ran it, but you could go in there till probably 6:30 or 7 at night and get something to eat.
The rate of change was like a log curve. It just kind of reached a point, and it just took, it went from being a small rural town to a suburb of Wichita.
My grandfather bought a quarter section, I think, where the corner of Central and Andover Road is. I think he bought a quarter section of area there, and Dad bought 7 acres off of him, and that's where he put the shop to start with. He built a 30 by 80 building or something like that, and when I took it over, well, I added to it. Dad first started his first business. He went to Kansas City and learned how to be a mechanic. At that time, cars weren't that plentiful, and the Model Ts weren't real popular. I remember playing with Model Ts when I was growing up, and all kinds of cars. I had a stripped-down Allburn, probably never heard of one, but it didn't have a body on it, just a chassis. That car, you could pump oil pump there and oil everything on all the joints on the car. Now they don't do that today. And so anyway, that was part of the history that I remember.
While Andover had been a community for many years, it finally incorporated as a third-class city in 1957. The 1950s and the 1960s saw growth as Wichita and the aviation industry grew and more people moved to suburban areas.
It was very rural. Andover didn't even have football until I think it was 1958 or 59. They did have a basketball team, and they didn't have baseball until the late 50s either. So, there wasn't a whole lot of sports activity they had back then. But I knew they took a petition around town and hand carried it, wanting people to sign it to become incorporated into I think it was for some grants, money they were wanting to do a sewer plant out to the east, and they were wanting to get water and stuff. And I think it was just, as a town unincorporated, you couldn't get federal or state funding. So I think behind all that was, trying to get money to do that. The old town, which was basically just to the north of 13th Street and just south of the high school, that's all Andover was at the time. And then you had from 13th to Central that it was building up a little bit. It was still a pretty rural area, but the people down south did not want to be Andover. They wanted to become Malcolm City. And the people in Andover were still trying to get, at that time, I think it was the water for sure, because we didn't have the water tower yet. And so they was trying to form the Andover Water Company. So they went to the ones that were trying to do the Malcolm City and said that, they would let them have 2 seats on the city council if they would give up and join Andover. So I guess through all the haggling back and forth, they agreed to finally doing that. And the Charlie Clay and all those guys up north that were on the city council, 2 of them gave up their seats. They appointed 2. And then we became Andover, big Andover, from 150 to 180 to 600 almost overnight. And then we went to, that was in 66 and 67. And then in 68, in order to try to get everybody to get along, they decided to have a big party. And down in front of the fire station, down to the high school down there, they set up booths and had all kinds of games, horseshoes. Oh, that was big back then. Horseshoes, they had a pony pull and some other stuff. And that's how we had our very first Andover days, was in 1968, to try to get everybody together and have the South and the North meet and everybody have fun. And we did. We had a pretty good time.
On April 26, 1991, a large tornado outbreak struck south central Kansas. The outbreak produced an F5 tornado that heavily damaged Andover. 21 people were killed by this F5 tornado, of which 17 were residents of Andover. The tornado blazed a path nearly a mile wide, causing destruction that stretched from Hayesville up through El Dorado Lake. All in all, that night, 55 tornadoes broke out across the plains.
April 26, 1991, we were having a garage sale, and my son, my oldest son, was in the law enforcement academy in Hutchinson at the time. And they had got married, him and his wife got married the previous December, and he was coming home that weekend, and we were down in the basement when we heard, and I was on the fire department and the city council then, and we had heard that there was a tornado on the ground in East Wichita and headed towards us. Well, I called my son and I said, I want you and Christy come up to the house to the basement, because they lived in the mobile home park up there. And he said, he says, I just got home from the academy. He says, I don't want to come over to the house. Well, anyway, they called the pizza in at just about that time. This is at 5:45, 5:50, just before the tornado was coming. Well, they thought they'd come by and see if there's anything they really wanted that we were selling at the garage sale, because they could have whatever they wanted. And it just so happens that tornado started picking up more speed, and we went up. I was on the fire department, like I said. I went up to look out to see what was happening when we seen the tornado out the back of my house, and it just looked like it filled the whole sky right there. And I hollered and told them, I said, get under the pool table downstairs. And we went and hid, and that's the only time in my history of being in Andover I ever went to the basement. Usually I was out on a fire truck or something to help spot for everybody else, but I was just at home and so the tornado hit, I can't remember exactly, 5/6/28 or something like that. And Bill was on the police department then, just finishing the academy. And we got in my car and we made it down Andover Road it was just past where City Hall used to be here on Andover Road. And then everything was just blocked. So we walked on down to see what was happening, and Malcolm's garage was gone. We could see that when we got closer, and you could just look down to the south, and there was nothing. And Bill went to get with the police department to see what they could do. And I kept walking to the south, and somewhere around where Livingston's restaurant used to be by Pizza Hut down there, I met Jack Fendelson walking the other way. Jack was coming from south of Kellogg where he lived, and I was walking from there, and we met right there where the trailer park used to be. And I mean to tell you, it was just the devastation. The church was gone. You could see the Catholic church was gone. The mobile home park was just completely wiped out. The church that was right there by the mobile home park was gone. Livingston's was gone. And I looked at Jack, and then we stood there and we cried in the middle of the street. There was nothing else to do. The town was gone. I mean, everything was tore up, and it was just, it wasn't a good time.
I was actually in Hobbs, New Mexico, attending my uncle's funeral, and I get a call from my cousin saying, this lady wants to talk to you. And it was my mother-in-law saying, first thing she said, Carly and the kids are okay. Well, that's the way I left them. What's the big deal? And about that time, it came across the TV down there, and it was the shot from Teradyne. And the thing is, my house is kind of down over the hill and down away from Teradyne. And I thought, good grief. And it was nice, really nice hearing that my wife and kids, and then my wife ended up, got the kids placed, and then she ended up working with the medical side of things here at Andover Drug, and working with because she's a pharmacist, and working at also, and as I remember, anybody that they got into an ambulance, I think most of them survived. And so then I come home, and one of the first things I get on Ruth Helena's roof to start repairing that's the house that's just south of Walgreens, the only house left there. And then my brother was the keyboardist for St. Vincent's, and they always worried about the choir loft at St. Vincent's going down, classroom with all the people in it. It was the only thing left standing because apparently they had reinforced it enough. And my brother said a lot of his music and everything was still there. So I don't know whether it's divine guidance or what, but it just devastating to come back in and seeing what, and not only the loss of life, but but the churches got together. I know Father Mike. We had mass at the Methodist Church more than once, for different reasons. As an interim type thing, and I think it says a lot. Kudos to the rebuilding of Andover too.
When I came, I think the population was 3,900 or something in that range, and today it's about 14,000. Except for the intersection at Central and Andover Road. Andover Road was a 2-lane ditch section road. The 2 shopping centers, of course, were in place at Andover and Central, the Plaza and Andover Square Shopping Center. There were 3 major housing subdivisions that were kind of active being built. And 1991 came along, the tornado, and absolute chaos. I lived south of Highway 54 and just happened to have my children that evening, and I was in the kitchen frying chicken for dinner, watching the news on Channel 12, and Merrill Teller said, "Andover, you're in imminent danger." So, like all Kansans, I walked out on the porch to look and took my kids to the basement. And when we came up, I thought, well, I should get to work. And I tried to get to City Hall north of Kellogg. Everything was blocked. I couldn't get there. I had to make a drive out in the country and come back in from the north. And so that was many months of recovery from the tornado.
We really had a immediate response. We had ambulances from Sedgwick County, Butler County, Sumner County showing up. Sedgwick County Fire showed up too to help Butler County on rescue and everything. And I'll tell you, before 8 o'clock that night, we had a real big response going through everything in the trailer park, because that was the main damage, that and the housing addition just to the west there. And it was really fast. And in the days that followed, Governor Finney was here, and Bob Dole, and Bob Dole is, like I told you before, he's my hero. Bob come in and ask what you really needed. We had a command post set up in the Meadows Shopping Center, and after he'd gone through everybody and talked with us, and he said, "Well, what do you need?" And I said, Jack and I were sitting there, and I said, "Well, mainly," I said, "there's a lot of people in this trailer park that didn't have insurance or anything." I said, "We need money." And he says, "Okay." Bob sat down at that desk right there, and he made 2 phone calls and had $200,000 donated immediately. And he was responsible for probably getting almost $400,000 donated to the people of Andover for the emergency response to, get building back and everything. So, like I said, Bob's boy's been my hero and still will be.
The conditions seemed to align for new housing growth. And we went from having 20, maybe 25 new houses built a year to 100 to 150 houses a year. And it's been on that same path ever since. I think all the stars just came in alignment. The economy was good. Interest rates were good. The schools in Andover were good. The government was progressive at that time. We had a very progressive city council who wanted growth. I think that's been the key ever since is the progressive thinking of our city councils.
Kind of one big family, and everybody looked after each other. Still feel very close to everyone that I grew up with. I think of the saying, "It takes a village," because the community really was family.
Seen as a modern suburb of Wichita, Andover's roots go back much further.
Join us next time as we explore another story at the Kansas Crossroads.